interesting Russian by the name of Maxim Shevchenko. It's very interesting. On one day in the first week of February, there was an anti-Putin demonstration of about 50,000 people in Moscow, and that there was a demonstration of 150,000 people at Victory Park, Poklonaya Hill, outside Moscow, that was addressed by this guy Shevchenko and some others. It was 3 times bigger. The U.S. media didn't report that, and this was pro-Putin, but critically pro-Putin. It was not, blank check for Putin.
But let me stop you for a minute. I had Colonel Anthony Schaefer, who's, high-level intelligence connections, and he said, A, these wars are illegal, are treason, and went over the evidence, but he also said yes. And he said a lot of folks in the Pentagon say, leave Russia alone. They're not trying to be expansionist. Why mess with them? Why poke them? And then a lot of Pentagon folks think messing with Russia will make them actually get behind hardliners. So again, when the Pentagon's speaking out, or sources are, what's the stratagem then to mess and poke with Russia? Because history shows Russia only unifies when it's under attack, and that this isn't going to work. And then the West admitted they're trying to do a color revolution and disrupt their elections over there. I mean, and it obviously didn't work.
Yeah, the word orange, right? Orange means the Kiev color revolution of 2004. Orange in Russian is bad. It's like, yellow, right? It's a bad color to be. So there was an anti-orange movement. The thing with Russia now is Russia has drawn a red line around Syria, as far as I can see. Medvedev refused to draw a red line around Libya, although he could have. And the ambassador Chamov said to him, "You're a traitor." And this guy Shevchenko that I'm telling you about went on Russian state television and said, Medvedev has committed a crime. And Shevchenko was fired. Well, now Shevchenko is back, so he's on Moscow television most nights. So the idea is the only thing, and it's the only thing, stopping the U.S., the British, NATO, and the Israelis from launching an attack on Syria and Iran is the fact that Putin is back. The Russians have sent their fleet to Tartus, right? The port. I've seen the port.
And the Russian stock market's up.
Well, the Russians have also delivered, we believe, these S-300 surface-to-air missiles, probably the most capable system in the world. The Russians are providing intelligence, right? They help along with the electronic monitoring and the radar stations and so forth. So if you attack Syria, this is not the cakewalk that the Anglo-Americans like to have, and I believe this is what's stopping them. So the fact that Putin has been reelected, I must say, is the best thing that's happened in the world in quite a while. I also, but I think he needs to do more. I'm not here just to say, go Putin, but he needs to take some important steps. We're on the verge of a war in the Middle East. We've got to have an initiative for a Middle East peace conference or something of that type. Putin right now is the most prestigious leader in the world, bar none, in the broad world, right? Not in the world of CBS News maybe, but out there in the real world, yes. What he needs to do is to take that political capital and use it. Let's have a general peace conference, right? The Israelis say they feel threatened. I'm sure they do. How about the Iranians? They feel threatened too. Go to the table. Lebanon needs to be
well, I know you like Pooty Poo, but I
Iraq
watched him go along with all these other wars. Very corrupt system over there as well. I'm asking you, how are things? That's
not even the question.
How are things going in the? But let's expand. Euro is in the middle of this, collapsing, but into this global banker receivership of fraud. They're openly butchering the Bill of Rights publicly in the United States. What's the larger global order? I mean, you're saying that the Anglo-American banker establishment is freaking out. Why are they freaking out? Where do you see things going?
Well, the derivative castle, right? The house of cards of 1.5 to $2 quadrillion of bankrupt, kited, insolvent derivatives. This is permanently on the brink, right? And their demand is always increase the looting rate, increase the rate of exploitation in the third world. And if governments get in the way, as they necessarily do, smash the governments. So right now, though, I think we can look at it internationally. If you look at the UN General Assembly, in that vote on the anti-Syria resolution of about 2.5, 3 weeks ago now, there were 12 no votes. Well, that was Russia, China, Iran, Syria, Venezuela and their group, the ALBA group.
But those didn't count. I mean, only the Security Council votes counted of Russia and China.
But wait. I'm trying to show you the way the world is going. 12 no votes. There were 17 abstentions. Some important countries there, and then there were 30 countries that just didn't show up. Right, the Philippines. They just didn't show up. The heat was too great. They wanted to vote no or yes, but they couldn't take the heat. So there are about 60 countries, 1/3 of the world, that despite the most intense arm twisting, blackmail, bribery, and whatever else, we're not supporting the imperialist resolution against Syria. Now, that's a sign of the times. Once you've said Russia, China, that's half the world, right? The biggest country geographically, biggest country demographically, Iran, leading Muslim state, Venezuela, leading South American state, go through the list, right? All kinds of countries that could not see their way to support this monstrosity. So I think that's a real change. 1/3 of the world is not playing ball with the Anglo-Americans in some way.
Well, I want to be clear. The Anglo-Americans are not pro-America. They're not pro-Europe. They're not pro-liberty. In closing,
right.
Euro, open world government run by private banks, all being announced, everything else that's happening over there, admissions that we're going into a deeper depression, long-term view. Where's all this going?
Well, again, you always say take the subjective factor out, and I can't because, you know, some of us are here and you're here and we're all here. I think what you need is a movement to break the power of finance capital, and that's to break the power of Wall Street finance capital. And I think that could emerge at any point. There's certainly plenty of masses in motion in Europe. Here in the United States, we've got all kinds of struggles going on against the fascist governors of the Midwestern states. Let's take Michigan, right? If you don't like dictatorship, you're not going to like Governor Snyder of Michigan because he's got a law where he says he can become the dictator of Detroit and Flint and Grand Rapids and Traverse City and all those places in Michigan. He can be the dictator as soon as he says you're bankrupt, I'm taking you over, I'm sending in a commissar who's going to rule you by decree. So you're talking about wiping out democracy.
Yeah, let me add a caveat to that. It's not just Michigan. Rhode Island's doing it all over. This is the third world model where they induce you into fraud. The state signs you onto the derivatives, and then they're coming in and taking control and saying no more city council, or the city council can be administrative. I mean, this is corporate takeover.
Yes, I think that's the cutting edge of the struggle against dictatorship inside this country. And again, those blue collar workers out in the Midwest. The funny story, you know, you go overseas and they say, "Tell us about Occupy Wall Street. It started in September, right?" And I say, "No, it started with the occupation of Madison, Wisconsin." Back in February,
sure, but the system co-opted that. But Webster, let me throw in.
It didn't. That's what the system tried to suppress, and then they give you this substitute, right, which is the petty bourgeoisie and the lumpen proletariat in the form of Occupy Wall Street with David Graeber and the Adbusters Institute, right? This is not what you need. Obviously, you need those people too, but not those leaders. So it seems to me you've got a mass strike process going on. You've got the ingredients there. You need what you always needed: program, leadership, some kind of organization, and some kind of strategy. And at that point, you could make rapid progress.
All right, so I understand. I don't know if I subscribe to all those government solutions because it always gets taken over by a bunch of criminals.
I'm talking about mass struggle. I'm talking about the only possible way to go. I'm afraid we look at the presidential campaign. I don't see how this how anybody could go into it. I mean, it seems.
Well, listen, that's a pretty much decided thing more and more between Obama and Mitt Romney. We're going to have to discuss that at a future date, but we're out of time here. I want to ask you about the fact of Congress, who's been pro-war, pro-tyranny, pro-torture, pro-every form of corruption you can imagine, is now getting mad that Obama and SecDef, Panetta, and the rest of them are telling them, hey, we're going to launch wars without you now. You don't even matter. And Congress is finally freaking out. And they're saying our authority is these international bodies themselves that are controlled by the central banks, the UN, NATO, groups like this. Why do you think the system's racing to put in a classical tyranny here in the United States?
Well, this is obviously the motor force comes from the economic breakdown crisis. In other words, the The fact that the capital structures of New York and London are collapsing pushes them to demand, again, more loot, more exploitation, more sacking, downward pressure on the standard of living, bust all the unions, tear up the contracts, destroy the social safety net, use the proceeds for new and better bailouts, new and better subsidies for the rich and super rich. So that's the motor force that's doing it. But of course, that can very well provoke countervailing social movements, right? That's the history of the 20th century, is that a super austerity policy will lead to a social explosion. And the big question then is, who's going to lead the social explosion? Will somebody be there with leadership, or are you going to get ad busters, David Graeber, Michael Moore, Noam Chomsky, and others that guarantee absolute defeat?
Controlled opposition.
Right, sure.
Controlled left, controlled right.
Controlled means it's going to be destroyed. I have to say, with Occupy Wall Street, when you look at this now from retrospectively, the anarchists who took over Occupy Wall Street had really one program. They wanted to have a hippie commune in the park with no demands, nothing political. They said, we're going to start living the new utopia, right? We're going to live the new world that we want in the park. And no demands, right? They're not going to do anything for working people.
Sure, but that's not even as bad as the new liberal calls for wars because there's some boogeyman off in the bushes there in Central Africa. Webster, tarpley.net, author. Look forward to having you on the radio soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending time with us.
Good luck, Alex. See you soon.
We're going to go to break. Let me say bye to you during the break. Wow. I mean, love him or hate him, his overall analysis is spot on, and he's been all over the world. I got to get him back on about his trip to Iran. He also went to Syria. This guy has a lot of courage, and certainly what he's talking about with Afrikaan and this invasion is so real. We're going to come back and talk about the TSA didn't just block the video of an engineer exposing the fact that their scanners are a fraud and don't stop bombs. They're now telling members of the press, you don't talk to this guy if you know what's good for you. You don't talk to the press in America. This is land of the slave, home of the coward, New World Order Central. Well, we're extremists. We think in America there is a press, there is free speech. I'm sorry, I apologize. I believe there should be due process as well. I believe that you have a right to visit INFOWARS.com, and if you believe in what we're doing, become a subscriber at PrisonPlanet.tv. We have 15-day free trials running right now. We'll be right back after this quick break with our next guest. He's the guy that runs the website TSA Out of Our Pants.
One is a serial hypocrite who lobbied for Freddie Mac before the housing crisis and for the individual mandate before Obamacare. Another, a counterfeit conservative who opposes right to work, massively increased spending, and funded Planned Parenthood. Finally, a flip-flopper who's been on all sides, supported TARP bailouts, and provided the blueprint for Obamacare. Three men, one vision. More big government, more mandates, less freedom. One man stands apart, ready to deliver real change, voting against every tax increase and every unbalanced budget every time. A real plan to cut $1 trillion year one.